All right, guys, we're back here on the bonus round with Pachter, Rubin, and Blackley to talk about the next gen of consoles. So we talked about Microsoft, talked about Sony. Let's talk about the developer, the creator. As you mentioned at the beginning, James, it really is about the games, the experiences that get us excited. So if I'm a developer right now in a great studio that is not necessarily a first-party studio, where do I want to make games? Is it Xbox? Is it PlayStation? Is it every system? Is it tablets? How do people think about it, Jason?
Well, I think if you're a AAA studio and you've had large AAA successes, you're going to stick with what you know because there's a handful of these companies on the planet. There's been less every year. That was something else that was said 7 years ago, that the number of AAA studios was going to decline. It has declined significantly. Someone threw out a number recently. There are 25 that matter. I don't know that it's 25, 35, but there aren't a lot of AAA studios that matter out there. So you are going to make games where the gamer will be to play AAA games, and right now that's console and PC. There's no question about that. They are not going to be making games for tablet. What will happen is a lot of the older teams that have fragmented, and new teams will start making console-style games for tablet. And maybe in 5-6 years it'll be interesting to those AAA developers to step down onto tablet. But for a while, they're going to continue to make games where it matters. 29 million units of Grand Theft Auto says that that's the place you want to be, right? $1 billion of Call of Duty in, 24 hours or whatever, I don't know the exact stat, but certainly quick. That's the place they want to be. Those teams aren't going anywhere. Those teams are going to stay where they are.
Well, Jason, you're a very business-driven developer, and you always were, and it brought you a lot of success. But there are a lot of developers who don't think that way. There are a lot of developers to whom the audience they're talking to matters, more than even the profitability. And I think that the explosion in creativity around indie games shows that there are a lot of people to whom that's the most important thing. And a lot of times, they're terrible business decisions, and these guys go out of business, and a lot of ramen gets sold and eaten. But the explosion in platforms means also an explosion in ways to interface with the audience. And there are people who have game ideas that would never get made on console, whole genres that never would have existed on console, and ways of interacting with fans that never would have existed on console. And it's not just because of tablets. I mean, you look at what Valve is doing with their experimentation around open betas, around Greenlight, et cetera. And it fits and starts, but it's really cool to watch and to see what that kind of stuff brings up. Okay, the problem inherent in all of this, goes back to my ramen comment, which is that at some point, if you're running a company and you want to keep on making games, you have to be Jason Rubin. You have to be smart about business. And so the question really is, which of these ecosystems is going to find the best balance between the creative concerns and the business concerns. And weirdly enough, and ironically, Sony, in the world where there was just console business really, Sony was the place where there was this incredible balance between business and creative freedom. And a lot of really great developers, including Jason, were sort of formed there and got a tremendous opportunity to build great things and be very creative there. And that's expanded now. And that's really an important subtext to this whole discussion, which is not only which, on just a pure grinding business basis, which of these platforms is going to move the most units and have the biggest revenue numbers in software, but who's going to present that to the people who make the software in such a way that they get the most of the stars.
Since I know this gets you guys going, you're both right, and I'm not going to say you're both wrong. Raph Koster was here when we were on break, and he was on a panel with me, and he actually observed this, so I want to give credit where credit's due. But he said, in this mobile tablet world, you can get 6 guys together in a room, and they can make a game in 3 to 6 months that's a really good quality game. And these guys need, $3,000 a month each to, pay their rent and eat ramen. And he goes, so how much money do you actually need? You need $120,000 and you can make a game. And if they can make $120,000, $121,000, they're running victory laps because now we can make another one. And so I think, and you said this earlier also off camera, the opportunity in mobile tablet dwarfs the opportunity in console. It's just that there are going to be far fewer winners, but many, many, many more participants.
When I answered the question, I was not answering
you said
from a
AAA.
business
You said
standpoint.
AAA too.
But I want to be clear. If you're a AAA developer, you are continuing to make AAA games not because it's the most profitable place to be, but because not only what you know, but
if you're a AAA developer, you are so envious of those guys who
That's
don't have to
absolutely
make their
not true.
$1 million a
The
month
only
nut.
way to express yourself, I know this as a AAA developer, the only way to express yourself and make the games you want to make
You were a
is to
quadruple A developer.
continue to work on AAA titles.
Yeah.
They do not want to make games that aren't AAA of quality,
That's right.
because that is their
You're
vision.
not awake at
And
night
if you're
imagining guys on little platforms on the touchscreen.
if you're a
awake at night
AAA
imagining
developer,
something
I would
big.
add, a lot of these guys now are internal. They're working on salary.
Yeah.
They make bonus. That is not the place to make money, but they will still, because of their love of AAA games, they will stay there.
So-
to make the big bucks, you want Angry Birds, you want Clash of Clans. The odds are not with you, but if you want a chance to be a billionaire, literally, you're making mobile social games.
So when I said you're both right, where I was going with that is, of course, there's going to be the console
We won't be
AAA
told we're
experience.
right.
No, you are right. The console experience at one end. There's the whatever you want to call it, mobile tablet, smaller team, smaller budget experience at the other end. They're going to come together. And you said this in the earlier episode that CPU, GPU combos on tablets are going to get more powerful. The experience is going to get better. It's going to take years to morph that way, and you're going to have the gamer indifferent as to what he
Remember,
plays and where he plays.
As the
I totally believe that.
GPU combination gets better on those, and the resolution goes up, the cost of development goes up.
Sure,
As the
and that's why I
audience
said that
expectation goes
that
up. So that modifies the
$120,000
environment as well.
So that $120,000 budget game becomes a $2 million budget game in a year or two, and becomes a $10 million budget game. It'll reach a practical maximum.
But that's a really complicated.
But it'll
business
be a
situation
blend
as well
of all
because,
that.
Because right now, okay, the audience, the percentage of the audience you need to garner and get out to in order to make enough money that you make that
There's
nut
a lot.
is relatively small. If you go to $2 million, suddenly a bunch of other machinery has to
Understood.
come in, and the situation that caused the rise of Electronic Arts happens again. Because now you need somebody with capabilities beyond what you have in your development
all that
shop
budgeting
to
together, right.
make that economy
But
work.
there's plenty of talent out there that
Oh, yeah.
not making AAA games anymore, that is ready to go on these. Right now, we're in a black and white world. We're either AAA or we're making small games. There really isn't that much in between. There is an in between, but it's very small.
Yeah.
As the tablets get stronger and mobile gets stronger, what you'll find is
This is
you-
why I work Ray today.
you can make the games that AAA gamers want to make. You can express yourself
Right.
as a AAA gamer, but making a game that's PS2, PS3 quality,
Right.
not PS4, Xbox One quality. And that will be a very interesting moment for developers, because some of them will say, I'd rather go out on my own again. I've been working at salary for too long inside this big publisher. I want to take a shot and I want to do something different. And it's going to be a great moment for developers.
And by the way, now it's easier to do that than it ever has been before.
Absolutely.
Right?
That I
You know?
cannot. Absolutely. It is easier to become a game developer than it ever has been, because you could do it from anywhere on the planet, publishing without asking anyone's permission through iOS or however you're going to get it to the market. And there are tools to help you that weren't there when I started. It's absolutely easier to get started. And the money is there at the very low end, making very small games, that the next thing you know, you're one of the bigger game companies out there. There's never been a better time to be a developer.
All right, guys, hold that thought. We're going to be right back here on the bonus round. Now, Jason, you had worked inside of Sony for many years. One of the frustrations some of the first-party teams have always is that, hey, we're just addressing one audience, and we're not speaking to a wider audience. So Naughty Dog makes incredible games, but there are a lot of gamers that don't get to experience those games because they don't own a PlayStation. In this next generation, the idea of exclusive games for systems, are we going to see a lot of that from the publisher side, I guess, but also on the developer side? I mean, would there ever be a scenario where we talk about mobile and tablet? I mean, should Sony be putting, Tearaway that just came out for the Vita, should that eventually go on to, iPad or something like that? Or should
Absolutely.
old library content come out? I mean,
It
what-
will. You
what
will
needs to
still,
happen?
of course, you will still see first-party titles.
Right.
I mentally, I always used to complain that when Crash came out, we sold 9 million copies of a few of them, and that was on one platform. So
Right.
had we also been on our competitor, which at the time was Genesis, not Genesis, I'm sorry, but the Sega systems,
Right.
Saturn, we would have sold more units, so we would have done better. 9 million, it turns out, is more than Capcom has sold of any game they've ever put out. They just put out a press release that said their highest selling game was 5.6 million.
Right.
It turns out you can do really well making games for just one platform, and Naughty Dog continues to do that.
Yeah.
So Sony will continue to fund them. They've been incredibly good at funding them. Microsoft as well has funded internal. Those will stay around and they
now
will do
they've been
just fine.
successful with a game with a main character that doesn't look just like you, Nathan.
He looks just like Crash Bandicoot.
Right.
Naughty Dog's in a great position making
gotta see him without
first-party
his
titles.
costume
They're
on.
perfectly
Absolutely.
happy doing what they're doing. They're reaching a very large audience. The games are profitable. there's absolutely no reason for that to change.
But for the first time, it feels like now with these new systems and the architecture of PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, they're similar enough. I think a lot of developers will be able to more easily program things across those devices.
This is all asymptotic to the PC model,
Right.
and they're kind of like the same device inside. The major difference between them is the way the operating system lets you use or not use stuff, and that'll change over time. The traditional kind of stuff that barred developers from using them, or differentiated the way that they looked, is becoming less and less and less important with time.
So does the content then become more ubiquitous that you're going to see stuff on PC, console,
I think
maybe even tablet?
Outside of the first parties, why would you make something for only one console?
See, and
it doesn't make sense unless you're getting paid.
Especially
by one of the
if you're
consoles to do
taking
so.
a big financial bet on a big expensive game.
Since we're not talking about Nintendo, I want to bring them up. So I think the way Nintendo can get its mojo back is to release the entire Game Boy library, maybe even Game Boy Advance library, on cell phones and on tablets. And sell, and I know the control scheme's not the same, but it's something
No, it
that could
will
be
be,
done.
though. The controller is coming to
exactly.
tablet.
So if you sell Super Mario Brothers 3, the original Game Boy Advance game, for $4.99, on tablet, you're going to convert a giant number of these 2.5 billion people who are going to be on the internet. When your next console comes out, you can say, hey, you want to play Super Mario Brothers 4 or 5 or 6? I think that's a smart way to hook people.
I think you're even thinking about Nintendo in too small a context. Nintendo is Disney, and Nintendo
sure
just needs to figure out that they're Disney. And it's frustrating to watch them continuously not figure out that they're Disney. Like those characters and those games are so ubiquitous in world culture that you can't even really see how ubiquitous they are. They're so woven into everything. Okay, and continuing to focus on putting out consoles and doing the kinds of stuff they're doing, I think is belying the incalculable value and reach of all of that content. And that content should be everywhere. I think that the Sega lesson in Japan has such a horrible dark cloud over the idea of exiting that hardware business and going into a pure content business, maybe, and other economic factors that it's scaring them a little bit. But Nintendo could have a Disneyland. Nintendo could have a television network. Nintendo could have literally anything with those characters. And I'm wondering who's going to be the person who steps up and does it. And maybe it starts with going to.
The last time we did game that they should. Nintendo is a world treasure. Their games should be played by every child and many adults all over the world. However, they are not allowing us to reap that treasure because they are keeping it from us by forcing us to buy a piece of hardware.
Right.
They need to get off their high horse, and they need to allow us to play these incredible games wherever we really are, not where we want them to be.
Ironically, the reason Nintendo is where they are is because Yamauchi-san, who is a great man who deserves tons more respect than he ever gets, transformed them from a playing card company into a toy company, into a game company. And he had vision and he had courage to do it within an even more conservative Japanese business climate.
The last time I said that, the response that I got through emails and Twitter was, Nintendo makes a huge amount of money on their hardware. They're doing incredibly well on their hardware. Reggie says that they're going to make an incredible amount of money on their hardware. And what happened last quarter? They're not making a lot of money on their hardware. They're not.
So to answer your question,
it's time.
I think exclusives, first-party content, third-party exclusives would benefit from being offered on this much broader stage that we were talking about in the first episode.
Business, right?
I think because these 2.5 billion people are going to be gamers, and that 250 million console market might grow if you can convince those people, hey, you want to play the most recent iteration of this game, the highest graphic resolution.
Put even old like Jack and Daxter. Or
and if you don't convince them, at least you're making money selling them the $5 game.
Right, controller, exactly.
The
right.
controller has been I mean, it's one thing
Actually,
to say it's
your
not on my
DualShock 4
TV.
might work with your iPad.
That's right. As soon as, and Apple has released this standard.
Yep.
This is not something we're speculating. They've released this standard that if you go on the internet, you can see images of controllers that are coming out for iOS devices. That has been the barring factor. There's a reason controllers look like controllers do. It's because that is the best way to control that kind of game.
A group in the UK, like 10 years ago, determined that people were better drivers of automobiles using a PlayStation controller than using a steering wheel.
Oh, how interesting.
And that's a really fascinating kind of
that's
fact.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's Darwin. I mean, we've gotten the perfect controller.
Yeah.
That's why they all look
Keep
roughly
refining
the
them,
same. They
same.
are
Yeah.
really, really
Good at that, yeah.
at telegraphing from our brains to what
Yep.
we want to do on the screen. We need that on iOS devices.
Yeah.
Touch is great. Some games
Right.
will always use touch. That's all fantastic. Expands the market. But for the kind of games that we're talking about here, you need that controller.
Nintendo controller for iOS. We're calling it here. All right, we'll be back next week in the bonus round to talk more about how publishers are going to navigate all the new consoles.